So in the last video, I talked about rule-based detection for IPSs, and in rule-based detection, you effectively look for a very specific pattern, a signature, if you will, that helps you identify whether or not a particular attack is taking place or someone is trying to intrude within your enterprise boundaries. And what I'll do in this video is talk a bit about anomaly-based detection, which is an alternative technique for being able to detect threats. And one of the drawbacks of rule-based detection is you're looking for very specific threat instances, and sometimes you may see threat variations that may not be captured by specific rules that you already knew about. And so anomaly-based detection was created. It's a concept that's helped to kind of get us around that hump of the limitations of traditional rule-based detection. So basically, the way that anomaly-based detection works is you would start off with kind of baselining normal traffic. So you would kind of come up with some type of a baseline of what you consider normal traffic. Okay, and then if you have a baseline of normal traffic, then you can flag anything that is not normal. So flag anything that's an anomaly, or flag abnormal traffic. Okay, flag abnormal traffic. Okay, and so the idea here is that in order to be able to baseline normal, you would have some type of a training period that allows you to determine what's considered normal. And then when anything's out of the ordinary or abnormal, you would then be able to compare that against what you learned during that training period. So for example, you can do things like monitor bandwidth usage. So bandwidth usage is one classic example. Typically, bandwidth usage on a day-to-day basis should be fairly static, and if you see some weird spike in bandwidth usage, maybe it's a mass mailing worm or something of that nature. You can look for things like failed login attempts. This is actually a really good one. Oftentimes, you have systems, and on average, maybe on average, 1 out of every 50 logins is failed, where somebody types the wrong credentials in. And if all of a sudden you see that a given system has, it becomes from 1 out of 50 to 1 out of every 3 or 4 logins is failed, that might be a sign that somebody is trying to infiltrate the system by brute forcing usernames and passwords. Another example is you can look for things like the number of email messages sent per user. And that's actually a great way to detect things like mass mailing worms. So typically a mass mailing worm will send itself out to everybody in your contact book. And so if a typical user would send maybe 5 or 10 messages per day, and all of a sudden you're seeing that users are now sending 50 to 100 messages per day, clearly something is awry and that should be dealt with. And these are the kinds of things you can monitor by using anomaly-based detection. Now, having said that, I think there are some challenges to anomaly-based detection. So let me talk about some of these challenges here. And I think the biggest challenge, and this is maybe the most fundamental challenge, is that you have to be able to identify normal. So normal may not always be normal. So normal is hard to identify. What do I mean by that? Well, think about it. If you have a company, things are probably always changing in the company. Let's say you're hiring more employees over time. Hopefully you are. And if you're hiring more employees, that might cause your bandwidth usage to change. And so if you've done this initial training period when you had, let's say, 100 employees, and now if you have 200 employees, all of a sudden your bandwidth usage would have doubled, but your baseline, your normal baseline, would have only been reflective of having 100 users. Okay? Another issue is that, and I think this is maybe more of an issue of skew, actually. I think I would classify that as the actual characteristics are going to be skewed over time. Another thing you should be looking for, and actually let me kind of give one more variation on theme here, that even if you try to do some retraining, let's say you decided that you were going to retrain, and let's kind of call it training and maybe retraining over time, is a good way to help establish new baselines. Then you've got a new challenge. If you have a really motivated attacker, they may start by just doing a little bit of weird stuff on your network, and then gradually getting and gradually increasing that amount so that everything seems kind of normal. Like let's say, for example, you had a failed login attempt of maybe 1 out of every 50 logins. And so maybe what they'll start doing is they'll start at a very low pace trying to do brute force attacks. And so maybe that number goes from 1 out of 50 to maybe 1 out of every 45, 1 out of every 40. And over time, maybe it gets to 1 out of every 5 or every 3. But the idea is if you're constantly retraining, then the attacker can kind of fly under the radar and gradually kind of skew traffic. The other thing is that there are sort of legitimate anomalies, and this is an important point. For example, let's say you have backup software that runs once a month. On those days, your bandwidth usage might spike and maybe you'll see some weird characteristics. And if those legitimate anomalies are not captured as part of your training period, then there's a good chance that you'll be flagging them as abnormal and maybe flagging them as malicious by accident. Okay. A third challenge, and I think this is maybe a more fundamental challenge, is that triage is more complex. If you, let's say, identify an attack and you used an anomaly-based technique to identify that attack, it may be very hard to figure out kind of what caused that trigger to happen because these are more sophisticated. You're looking for more sophisticated characteristics, and it's hard to kind of go back and figure out what the root cause was. And I think that's maybe more of a fundamental operational point, but I think it's something that's important to keep in mind. Anyway, I will stop right here. I hope you found this useful, and I will look forward to doing some more videos on detection techniques used by IPS technologies. Thanks a lot.